Yeah, it's probably the hardest one so far. But by God's grace, we're going to keep going, and hopefully in a couple months, I'm going to remember this image, Debbie. The pieces are going to come together. And our last week, we're going to invite Jamie to lead a puzzle session. Right? No, I'm just kidding.
Especially puzzle, or each sheet's a puzzle.
Yeah. I'll make this right here a puzzle now. Buy one of those puzzles. Okay. All right, so now we're in chapter 16. Okay, I'm going to read just the last couple verses of 15 because, as we know, chapter divisions and verse numbers are something that came way after the Bible was written. And sometimes it's easy to forget that. So, it was probably 1,000+ years after the Bible was completed with the New Testament that we got these chapter numbers and verses. Before that, it would just be like a novel, all right, there it is. There weren't divisions. And divisions are helpful, but they also can break things up. So that's why I'm just going to read the end of chapter 15 and go right into 16 so we can get the flow of it. After these things I looked, and behold, the temple of the tabernacle, this is the Ark of the Covenant, in heaven was opened. And that's the Ark of the Covenant in the Holy of Holies, as we looked at last time. Chapter 15, verse 6, and out of the temple came the 7 angels having 7 plagues, clothed in pure bright linen, and having their chests girded with golden bands. Then one of the 4 living creatures gave to the 7 angels 7 golden bowls, full of the wrath of God who lives forever and ever. Remember, we're told here these 7 angels in verse 6 come out. Remember, this is the stepping aside thing. We talked about it last time, so I'm not going to go into it too much again. But remember, these 24 archangels or elder angels are around God's throne. They form the kind of the circle around the throne. And then right at the throne of the 4 living creatures, they kind of form the throne itself. And you have the 24 outside. And remember, there are 24 angels that do specific things in Revelation. There's the 7 the angels that have the seals. There's the 7 trumpet angels, and the 7 bowls, and there's a couple others. After each one does their duty, we get this sense, and we get it in chapter 14 as well, that they do their thing. They come out from the sanctuary, the Holy of Holies. They do whatever they're supposed to do, and then they kind of move out of the way. And so we saw that what they're doing appears to be, and this could be part of the puzzle, that we're going to see the puzzle complete at the end of the book. They're stepping aside, and how many spaces will they leave? 24. And how many of the saints are we told in the New Jerusalem will be established? You have 24. You have the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 disciples. And we'll see that towards the very end of the book. So they leave open this spot, this position around God's throne. Okay. And one of the 4 living creatures gives them, the 7 angels, 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God who lives forever and ever. Now, if you look back at chapter 6, verse 4, what do we have? No, sorry, not 6. Chapter 4, verse 6. Sorry, I flipped it. No, it's not 4, verse 6. It is, here it is. Sorry, chapter 5, verse 8. Now when the Lamb had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each having a harp and, wait for it, golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. So that's the first time we hear about bowls is chapter 5, verse 8. These bowls are full of incense, and the incense, we're told, are the prayers of the saints. Remember, you burn incense and it goes up. When we pray, we're offering the prayers up to God. It's that same movement from below, up above to God. Chapter 8, beginning of chapter 8. What do you have? And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. Then another angel, Jesus, the angel of the Lord, another angel having a golden censer came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar, which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints ascended before God from the angel's hand. So there you have incense again being associated with the prayers of God's people. And in chapter 5, they're bowls full of the incense. So that's just some background on thinking about bowls. So when you look back at Revelation, where we've already covered, chapter 5 has those golden bowls. And the golden bowls are only show up. They're only given those when what happens? When the Lamb comes and is worthy to take the scroll. Remember, the one who sits on the throne, God the Father, says, who's worthy to take the scroll? Remember when John cries, no one's worthy in heaven or on earth or under the earth to take the scroll. No one's worthy. And then out of nowhere, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Lamb, he's worthy. He takes the scroll. And then they get these golden bowls of incense. In your handout, you'll see a lot about bowls. And what's, over and over again in the book of Revelation, we've talked about this, where sometimes things seem, the content is so confusing that we almost just want to, we wish we could go back in time and just grab John and say, just tell me what you mean. Tell me what you mean. Make it more plain. For instance, I wish we could ask him, what type of bowls are you talking about? Are these the bowls of incense from chapter 5? Are these the sacrificial bowls from the book of Exodus? You see it in your handout, just under the letter A. Are these the drinking bowls from the book of Numbers? Are these bowls of water? Like, what's the thing right before the front door of the tent? The laver. Is that a bowl? Sure is. It's a kind of bowl. It's just like, can't really, this is our baptismal font here, the church. You can actually take it out. Look at this. That's a bowl. So in the Bible, there are many different bowls, and they have many different functions, and they all have to do something with worship. This word bowl actually could be translated chalice. The Lord's Supper, we have a chalice. This is like a bowl. So the reason I'm giving you all these examples is we might want to ask, well, what kind of bowl is this? Because there's so many different types of bowls. And at least here in chapter 16, I don't think we're given a clear answer. So it's kind of like if you ask someone, do you like pizza or ice cream or cookies? And the person says, yes. You go, no, which one? Yes. And maybe that's what's happening here. And maybe that's why John isn't giving us an extreme detail to say it's just this type of bowl. Maybe he's saying, well, there's many different ways that it's working out. And unfortunately, well, I think it's fortunately, that's how Revelation is a lot of times. We want it to, okay, what's the one way you're talking about bowls? And there's actually a lot of different ways. So it's going to get maybe more complicated before it gets easier, but that happens over and over in this book, doesn't it? At the end of chapter 14, and we talked about this in my small group, if you look at chapter 14, verse 20, remember there are the angels that come out of the sanctuary of the holy place, and they tell the Son of God, or Son of Man, who's Jesus, they say, take out your sickle and harvest. Remember, and they harvest the wheat, and then they harvest the vine, the grapes. And then we're told that they threw the grapes into the great winepress of the wrath of God, and the winepress was trampled outside the city, and the blood came out of the winepress up to the horses' girdles. for 1,600 furlongs, which is 184 square miles. And even though it says blood, so it's wine that is blood, and it's the blood of the martyrs, as Larry was just saying. So we want to think that these bowls hold that blood, and I think there's a sense in which they do. There's also a sense in which they can also kind of hold other things. And so we'll see that, but I just want to open that bowls do a lot of different things in the Bible, just like they do in the life of our church. Like I said, you're baptized with water that comes out of a kind of bowl, and then you receive the Lord's Supper out of a chalice that's a kind of bowl. We wouldn't use the word bowl, but the word here can mean those different things. All right. The temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no one was able to enter the temple till the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were completed. That's where we ended last time. Remember, so the last 7 angels have left God's throne, thereby opening up that doorway, because that second door, that veil, because the angels themselves are kind of forming that doorway. Now it's opened up, but no one can enter yet. Just like when Moses completed building the tabernacle, or when Solomon completed building the temple, it's filled with the cloud of God's presence. You can't enter it yet. The doorway's been opened, but you can't enter yet. Now chapter 16. Then I heard a loud voice from the temple saying to the 7 angels, "Go and pour out the bowls of the wrath of God on the earth." So the first went and poured out his bowl upon the earth, and a foul and loathsome sore came upon the men who had the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. Then I heard a loud voice from the temple saying to the 7 angels, whose voice would that be? A voice from the temple. This word temple is sanctuary. It's the Holy of Holies. It's the throne room of God. In Revelation, if we're told there's a voice coming from the throne or a voice coming from the sanctuary, it's almost always God the Father. But a lot of times in the Bible, God the Father isn't named. So it'll say a voice from above, or the voice, or sometimes it'll say, God said, but sometimes it'll just say a voice from heaven. This is God the Father. Finally speaks, tells the 7 angels, go and pour out the bowls of the wrath of God on the earth. So the first went and poured out his bowl upon the earth. A foul and loathsome sore came upon the men who had the mark, the beast, and those who worshipped his image. I should have brought my Russian doll thing. Remember the Russian doll with the nest? There's a smaller and smaller. If you look back at the 7 the 7 trumpets, and to a lesser extent, if you look at the 7 seals, you'll find that the first one is directed to the earth. This first bowl, where is it poured out? On the earth. Or land. Your Bible might say land. Remember, in Revelation, land isn't just any land. It's kind of the promised land, God's special land. It's Israel itself. The second thing, like in the trumpets and in the bowls, the second is the sea. The third is the streams or springs, the springs and rivers. Fourth, here you go. What was created on the 4th day? The sun. Were you surprised? No, we're not, because we're learning Revelation, and every 4th thing is almost always sun, moon, and stars. In Revelation, the 4th seal, the 4th trumpet, the 4th bowl, sun, moon, and stars. 5th is the beast's throne, isn't it?
Throne of the beast.
Yeah, throne of the beast. Okay. And then 6. Say it again?
Euphrates.
Okay, right. Yeah, Euphrates. And then, like all the other groups of 7, the 7th is always the longest one. So that one will take us. That one we'll just leave maybe. That one's going to be take a little longer, isn't it? Okay, so well, I'm not going to get it out. Remember in our first couple sessions I had the Genesis 1 chart and I have it in there. We'll look at it again soon. It doesn't map to this exactly. Well, it kind of does, but the way you can remember it is that the sun, moon, and stars are always created on day 4, Genesis 1, and in Revelation, the sun, moon, and stars always have something to do with the fourth thing. And so if you look at the trumpets, there's a judgment on the earth first, then on the sea, then on the springs of water. Remember wormwood in the springs? Remember the mountain on fire is thrown into the sea? Remember that? And it's in the same exact order. Remember the locust army that comes out of the abyss? What trumpet is that? The 5th. What's the 5th? Throne of the beast. See the Russian dolls nesting on each other? It's in the same order. But here's a difference. And I think Roger asked this. Remember, Roger asked, why is it 1/3 of the trumpets? Remember? It was 1/3 of those in the sea. It was like 1/3 of those on the earth. I'm not sure if in the seals we might have had 1/4. I don't. Do you all remember? I might be wrong. It might have gone from 1/4 to 1/3. But now in chapter 16, where is it going? All. Or there's a fulfillment, there's a fullness here. Instead of 1/3, it's 3/3. It's going to be the whole thing. So the trumpets are kind of a warning, right? When the walls of Jericho fall, how do they give a warning? Trumpets. They go around 7 times. Blow your trumpet. Blow your trumpet again. And again. 4th, 5th, 6th, boom. Right? It's like the same thing here. Trumpet warning, trumpet warning, trumpet warning. If a king comes into a city in ancient times, the trumpets come up first. Hey, the king's coming. Get ready, the king's coming. The king's going to come. Now he's come. All right? So the seals were like the whisper. Psst, he's coming. Right? The 7 seals, he's coming. The trumpets, he's coming. And then by this point, boom, he's coming. Okay? So that's why many of the things we're seeing, it's like, didn't we already read that? Yes and no. Kind of, but not in its fullness. And that's where maybe whispering versus trumpeting versus a pouring out a bowl is a good illustration of there's a little bit, there's a lot more, and then it's everything. 1/4, 1/3, all. So this first bowl is poured out on the earth, and a foul and loathsome sore came upon the men who had the mark of the beast and those who worshipped the image. A sore. What is this sore? What is this about? Well, this has to do with the concept in the Bible of leprosy. I can't spell leprosy. Remember, in leprosy in the Old Testament, there's a lot of laws. The book of Leviticus is filled with laws about if you have leprosy, the priest has got to observe you. So the priest looks at you once and checks your skin, and leprosy would be a white mark. And the priest would look at you, look at your skin. Then the priest would come to you 1 week later and look and see if it's grown. Has it spread? And if it's spread, say, okay, you have leprosy. And I don't know exactly, I'd have to research, maybe you know, the exact process, but there's a process for you to do before you can come back in the fullness of the community. Mainly what leprosy meant was, if you had it, there's a certain amount of time that you couldn't be around other people. I mean, of course, it's contagious, right? You also couldn't go and worship in the temple or the tabernacle until it was taken care of. So you were unclean. Unclean is not the same thing as sinful. It doesn't mean you did something bad necessarily. It just means you caught something that you need to take care of before you can come into the temple. Yeah. And there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions about what exactly is leprosy. And the short answer is no one knows exactly. One theory, I think this is a really interesting theory we don't know, is that it could be the case that leprosy is something that we don't have in the modern world because Jesus, his entire ministry, was casting it out of people. And it could be that after Jesus himself, we don't have anything remaining that is exactly the type that existed then, because he took care of it. Totally. It doesn't mean there's no skin issues now. Of course, there's cancer now and other things. But did he take care of that particular type of, who knows? We don't know. But it's this sword. What was one of the 7 plagues of Egypt? Boils. Boils are like this. I'm not saying they're the exact same thing. I don't know, but they're of course very similar. They're on your skin, they're really painful, they can kind of spread and grow and all of that. So it's like the plague of boils. In Genesis 3, when Adam and Eve are being sent out from the garden, God curses the serpent, and then God curses Adam. And one of the curses to the serpent is not only you're going to be on your belly and eat dirt all of your days, but remember, God curses the earth that the serpent's going to be on, that the earth is actually going to then have thorns and thistles. Thorns and thistles come about at that point. And then God says, Adam, you are going to work by the sweat of your brow. And this is a whole long story, but there's some Bible teachers think that sweat, the sweat of the brow, that curse, has some connection with leprosy. So if you have like this intense sweat that is uncontrolled and like non-stop, that it could lead to this kind of leprosy. Scientifically and all that, who knows? Probably not. Who knows? But there's a theme in the Bible that the earth having this curse from the garden or at the fall has something to do maybe with leprosy. I just say that because this is on this first bowl that has to do with the earth. So there's a connection between earth and leprosy. And so these people have the mark of the beast. So think about this too. The mark is on their skin. They have a mark of the beast. Genesis 3, sweat of your brow. Brow is here. Where's the mark of the beast go? Here. Some connection with the forehead and the skin. The mark is on your skin, and it's on your forehead. The sweat of the brow, it's on your forehead. So basically, they're sinning against God, committing idolatry, and then there's a sense that they're committing, the way that they're committing a sin against God is they're doing damage to their body. They're committing idolatry, the mark of the beast, and then their body is actually taking on some kind of judgment, really. Some kind of curse as a result. So that's a little bit about this first bowl. I know our time's coming quick here. Second bowl, verse 3. Then the second angel poured out his bowl on the sea, and it became blood as of a dead man, and every living creature in the sea died. So now we're in the sea. Like I said, we're not going to do it right now, but if you want, flip back to the 7 trumpets and you'll see first one is earth, second trumpet has to do with sea. the seven seals, it's not exactly that clear, but in the seven trumpets, you can see that. Now it's the sea, and the sea turns to blood, as we were talking about later. So here's the blood. Here's the blood. So here's the blood. In your homework reading, you looked at Exodus 7, the first plague, which was blood, the Nile River turning to blood, right? This is probably the most famous of the plagues of Egypt. And we see the same thing happening here. Even though it doesn't say it, as Larry has mentioned, I mean, when blood has been mentioned in Revelation, almost every time, it's about the blood of these martyrs. And so and we just saw that in chapter 14 with the wine press and and so it's very fair to say this blood has to be connected with the martyrs in some way. The book of Exodus does not say what I'm about to say, but I think it implies it. When the Nile River turns to blood, whose blood is that? Whose blood was innocently spilled in Exodus? All the baby boys. Remember chapter 1. Pharaoh says, kill all the baby boys. Just like Herod does in the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew. Kill all the baby boys. So the blood is a judgment because it's those who have died innocently. In Exodus, we know that the baby boys are the ones killed innocently. Here, the martyrs are those killed innocently. And so I think we have to say that it's their blood. When we first started just a little while ago, and we were talking about bowls are used for different things in the Bible. Remember, the incense is offered up in a bowl, a golden bowl. It's offered, and we're told in chapter 5 that it's the prayers of the saints. So it comes from the saints, and it's offered up. I'm going to use your blueberries. That's okay. All right. Debbie was so nice and gave me some blueberries. Thank you so much. And this is a bowl. All right. So if you give this to somebody, it has to be face up. No one would ever hold it upside down. So I hand this to you, right? The proper use of this is holding it facing up. Same thing with the water and the baptismal font and the juice, the wine in the chalice. If you're going to properly offer it to someone, you just offer it like this. So the prayer of incense, our prayers, symbolically, we offer them up like that. The offering plates, no one would ever do this, right? We even get this sense, it almost would get put our hair up on its end to do this. It feels like sacrilegious. Because it's in a sense, it's saying I'm rejecting what's in there. I'm going to let it drop to the ground. We wouldn't do that. It's facing up. That's a proper offering of things. You offer the incense going up. The ushers bring me the offering, and then what do? I lift it up to God, right? So that's what bowls do in the Bible, no matter what's in there. If it's incense, which is prayers of the people, it's lifted up. The blood of the martyrs. Where are the martyrs in the book of Revelation? Well, they're singing with the Lamb on Mount Zion. We saw in chapter, 14? But earlier, remember, they're under the altar. It's that altar right there, the bronze altar. And they're crying out. In a sense, their blood is like a bowl being lifted up too. Okay? So prayers are lifted up, bowls lifted up. But guess what's happening here? God himself is actually doing this. He's flipping it upside down. When we offer to him, it's always face up. But now he's taking it and going, right? Remember chapter 8, Pentecost. The other angel remember, he gathered the incense up, and then he added his own incense in. He goes to the altar, gets the fire from the altar, which is like God's presence. We're told God's an all-consuming fire. The fire fills this thing, and then what does he do? throws it to the earth. To throw something in a bowl is to flip it upside down, throwing it to the earth. And this happened in chapter 8, and we said that this is a picture of Pentecost. Pentecost is the Holy Spirit in heaven being thrown down. When we think of Pentecost, and if you just read the book of Acts, you might think Pentecost just means rainbows and unicorns and we're smiling and everything's good. But the book of Revelation is going to give us the flip side of that. Yes, God is love. And God is just and holy. God is love. And He's just and holy. So now we're seeing the just and holy side. So when Pentecost, when the Spirit's being thrown down, these things are being thrown down, it's not only glitter and rainbows and sugar on top. There's also going to be, some judgment. Right? If God's going to put things in right order, He's going to have to deal with things, all the things of our lives and all the things that are going on. So I just wanted you to think about that imagery. And even in church with the offering plate, we always offer like this, but somehow in Pentecost, we see it right here. The bird, the Holy Spirit, the dove, it's going down, right? The bowl's being flipped over, boom, coming down. Any thoughts or anything you want to share or questions so far in these first two, and just starting the bowls? This is our last 7. We can do it. It might be the hardest one, but we can do it. And then the puzzle pieces can maybe start to come together.
So does it help to think in terms of these bowls are God's wrath? Use that term. So this is Him, conquering evil.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think one way that's really helpful is chapter 6, verse 9 and 10. And we talked about it so many times, I just mentioned it. But the saints under the altar. Okay, so the incense represents the prayers of the saints, right? And we're told that, I think, multiple times. We're told that in chapter 5. Yeah, and then we're told that in chapter 8. We're told that twice. And so it's really important to mention more than one time. But I think the best picture we get of what is that prayer, if the incense is the prayer of the saints, what is that prayer of the saints? What is it? What is this prayer that's going up like this incense? It's chapter 6, verse 10. These saints under the altar, they cry with a loud voice, saying, "How long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth?" In Revelation, there's a whole lot of warfare. And it's easy for us to think, okay, warfare. All right, it's guns and swords and stuff. But it's more subtle. It's spiritual warfare, which doesn't mean it's less true or something. It's actually more true, but it's maybe harder to understand. But prayer is a huge part of that. So because the saints are saying, God, you got to do something. Like they killed me, they killed my family, they killed my friends. Like we need justice. Like we need you to do something. It's not just we're going to elect the right people and there's going to be a government that's utopian and then the government will fix everything. No, and I'm not saying the government doesn't have a place. They have a place and there's all that. But God ultimately, God, you have to do something. God, bring in your kingdom. You got to do something. And so I think Revelation forces us to really have to believe in the power of prayer. And we talked about it before in this group because that's the weapon of the saints. Remember, God's weapon is His Word, and our weapon is prayer and His Word. And so the saints praying, God, how long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? That's their prayer. And there's a sense in which that prayer is kind of the substance of what's being poured out. They're asking for it, and God's saying, okay, you've waited. It wasn't going to happen right away, but all right. You've been faithful, and by the power of the Spirit, this will start happening. And I think that's a big part of it. And I think another part that I will never understand this, certainly in this life and probably never, is that somehow God's love and God's wrath are two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other. If you say God's just rainbows and sugary everything, then there's no tough love. That God has no discipline or authority. But if you go the other side, then that God is just could be way too punitive, rigid. There's no love, gentleness there. But you have both. But they're two sides of one coin. And that's why this is Pentecost. But to those who are wicked, Pentecost looks like as scary as chapter 16. Right?
Like raising a child.
Does that help a little bit? Any other questions so far as we start the bowls? Okay. We'll have a number of weeks in the bowls. So I'm not expecting us to all understand, okay, we got the bowls down, we got it. I don't have it yet. I don't know if I ever, but I'm learning it too. The third angel poured out his bowl on the rivers and the springs of water, and they became blood. And I heard the angel of the waters saying, "You are righteous, O Lord, the one who is and who was and who is to be, because you have judged these things, for they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and you have given them blood to drink, for it is their just due." For it is their just due. And I heard another angel from the altar saying, "Even so, Lord God Almighty, true and righteous are your judgments." So these are being poured out on the rivers and the springs of water, and they became blood. If we looked back at the trumpets, we'd see that the rivers and the springs, this is where wormwood is hanging out, right? It doesn't mention wormwood here, but last time the seven trumpets, wormwood came at number 3 on the third trumpet. Wormwood is this fallen angel, this what is it, like a star, right? A star that fell into the springs. So now we're dealing not just with people, but with the demonic, with Satan, with fallen angels who are hanging out in the springs. The springs are different than the sea, and the main way they're different is they're underground. So instead of just like the ocean, now this is coming from under the earth. So the springs actually have a sense of being kind of connected with hell. Symbolically, they're coming from underneath. So it's no surprise that they're connected with wormwood. But the springs are supposed to be God's grace flowing out from the temple. We already saw that. Remember in the Garden of Eden, there's rivers flowing out in the 4 corners. And the temple is supposed to have a river flowing out. So God intended the springs to be good things. But obviously, they're not good things when wormwood gets a hold of them. So we're going to end on this one, but the rivers and springs also became blood. So number 2, the sea became blood, and then the third one becomes blood also. But we'll come back to this one next time. I think we're going to stop here. I mentioned in my group that I just love studying this with y'all. It's one of my favorite things that I've gotten to do being here. And I'm really glad that a number of you, when I asked, what kind of Bible study y'all want to do? And the only thing I got more than once was, Revelation, do Revelation. And I'm really glad we're doing it, because I'm learning a lot from y'all. I'm learning a lot on this journey. And And it's forcing me to just study the Bible in all new ways. And that's always good. And my favorite thing is y'all's commitment, y'all's exuberance, showing up every week, and y'all teaching me things and teaching each other things. So thank you so much for that. I mean, we're over 6 months in, and y'all are like dialed in. Y'all are so committed, and I love that. So thank you. Any closing questions or thoughts or anything you want to share? I also want to say this really is, I think, I've said this many times, I think this is the hardest chapter so far. So if you're frustrated, it's okay. I am too. We're gonna get through it, and I hopefully, by God's grace, and Debbie said, puzzle pieces will come together when we least expect it. It's kind of like the puzzle where if you're stuck, I just got to sleep on it, come back to it, and then it'll come. It'll come a little bit. I think it's the same thing here. Well, let's close the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. All right. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord, and I'll see y'all on Sunday. Our big car show Sunday. It'll be awesome.